Thanks for showing up, you guys. The theme today is those who call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. And want to introduce you to George and Margaret Keller, who some of you know, but I'll let them tell their story. They have quite a compelling story along those lines. So whenever you guys are ready. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
We feel like Grandma and Grandpa coming home to some of you kids. In August of 1992, it was a beautiful summer evening right here, and I got a call from our firstborn son. He says, "Hey, Dad, you ought to see the glow that's in tonight's sky." Well, now, hundreds of times we'd received a call from our son because he loved the fire service. But the facts were these. In a few minutes on the television screen, it says breaking news. They still do that stuff, breaking news. And they said there's arsonists probably loose. We don't know who, but we think it's an arsonist. Right over here by the Alderwood Mall, just north a few blocks of where he lived, there were 3 new homes, all under construction, and they were all burning at the same time. That started that arson campaign that started in that summer evening in 1992. And immediately, arson just strikes a terror to you. Now, the 2 or 3 of these young fellas here, if I offend you seriously and you come up here and we get in at fisticuffs, you know, for 15 or 20 seconds, they'll know that they've been to the dance. I'll get whooped in the end, but they'll know they've been to the dance, and there's a limit to the damage that takes place. But with arson, it's something else. With that ignition comes such devastation sometimes you can't imagine it. So the arson campaign started. But then the arsonist, as reported by Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, they said was one of the most sophisticated arsonists in the history of the United States because he manipulated the fire service, and he also was able to literally outthink the fire service and even their responses. He would shut down for a period of days. Sometimes it would be 7 or 10 or even 11 or 12 days in between fire setting sprees. So one of the next things that happened, we see on the news that there's 3 churches that are burnt in one night. The Trinity Lutheran Church over here on 196th Street. I didn't know anything about that as far as a relationship with that church until long after, when I encountered just this huge concrete burnt black hole in the ground that was the Trinity Lutheran Church. So that started a campaign, and the first thing that began to burn were usually empty buildings. But then what happened is that there were families that were sleeping in their homes at night. Their homes were set on fire. Over a period of 5 months, there were almost 100 fires. There were the 3 churches that were burnt. There were 50 or 60 homes that were set on fire. This is usually what happened. Almost all of this happened at night. I remember one family in particular that came, and I heard their story. They said, we woke up in the middle of the night and the home is filled with this black, gray, kind of reddish glow, and you smell the smoke. And there's a terror that instantly pops up in your heart. They said, they cried out, "Oh God, how are we going to get out of this home and our 7 children?" But they did, for which I thank God. But there were 50 or 60 homes that were actually burnt. Usually what happened, the time over target is how Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms described the attack plan of the arsonist. That's their verbiage, time over target. And they said that usually his time was one of the shortest ever in the recorded history of their investigations. It was usually 20 or 30 seconds. What would happen is that if you had a little boat in your carport covered by a little tarp, which is highly flammable, with the flick of a bic, that thing's on fire and bam, fire takes place. I remember one of the news articles of which there were just endless stories. But I remember a grandma, might even been somebody's grandma that was here, beautiful gray-white hair, white grandma, nightgown, the little home in the back, a little white home, it's just this cloudy, gray, dark black smoke is just rolling out of there. And she's being brought out of the home on a gurney by the fire department, and she's covered with this soot. The evil of attacking the innocent is beyond my ability to explain the pain. 50 or 60 families attacked like this, just terror. The manipulation of the fire service just exceeded anything that they have ever experienced before. One classic case was this. Right over here on the north end of Seattle, there was a very large commercial fire station that had 7 bays in it. I mean, this is a big fire station. Our son, Paul, was intimately aware of people in the fire service. He had hundreds of firemen were his friends and police officers. And he was highly mobile because he worked for me at that time, and I provided a car and his ability to get around. So it wasn't anything for him to go 400 or 500 miles in a day. But on this particular night, the very north end of the area of responsibility for this large station in North Seattle, he went out to one single block, and in a short distance, just a few thousand feet apart, on this same block, street, he set 2 homes on fire at the same time within just a matter of minutes. So this huge station was sucked dry. I mean, that's their number one priority. Get out of there, go and then take care. I mean, that's what they're there for. Well, now, if you're an arsonist, you can experience what you might call arson heaven as an arsonist. Now, this is how perverted can it get. But if you park your car at the right place on a hill by that now empty fire station, you can watch what is called move up. That takes place to this very day. Move up means you cannot have a large fire station like this void of equipment, because there's thousands of people that have to be protected. But if you park your car in the right place, it's code 3 move up. Code 3 means it's lights and siren, and you can watch the equipment moving. While this huge station was empty, out attacking these 2 homes, before move up equipment could come in, the arsonist, our son Paul, went across the street from that station to a large commercial bakery, set it on fire and burn it flat to the ground, and destroyed that business. So over a period of 5 months, there were 50 or 60 homes that were burnt. There were empty warehouses. There were the churches. The terror of it just, it's an attack against one of the deepest values that you would feel inside is to be at rest and peace. Mm-hmm. And arson is a literal attack against that foundation. Mm-hmm. All the while, we are praying for that arsonist to be captured because we have no knowledge who it is. In the process of these 5 months, the most egregious night, there were 14 fires set one night. Fires kept getting closer to us. We lived in North Everett. We had a beautiful all-brick home, all paid for on the 15th fairway of the golf course in Everett. I was the first Keller ever to own the home free and clear. My first 16 years of my life is that I was raised in a garage, 12 by 24 feet in Silver Lake. It was all woods then. And I was highly motivated that I didn't want to live in a garage. So I worked very hard, and God blessed my efforts, and so they had a beautiful brick home that my sweetheart maintained wonderfully. But even with a brick home, she began to be really concerned about the arsonist because the fires getting closer. So on this one night, there's now 14 fires, and to show how the manipulation took place, this happened in Everett, 2 of the fires. Close to downtown Everett, there was a whole block, and the alley in the middle of the block that runs the length of the block, there were apartment buildings on either side, just filled up this whole block. Usually, as you can understand, how cars in the alley would park undercovering for this group of apartments, and on the other side, follow me? The fire department responds to this apartment building on one side is on fire. There's 2 stories of apartments, and there's a long stairway up the side of one of these buildings, and this whole thing's in flames. Well, you got people that their lives are at stake. I mean, this is serious stuff. So the Everett Fire Department is in there, and they're attacking this fire from the alley because that's where they had to be. About 3 minutes after they begin this attack here, 12 feet across the alley, the other apartment building is now on fire. Over a period of the 5 months, behind the scenes, there was a secret arson task force, 120 people, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, the FBI, arson investigators, I mean the whole load. They were located in a secret headquarters in Mill Creek, Washington, and they were able to keep that facility and site secret from the media, which is a monumental achievement, but it was life and death is what was at stake here. Over a period of this time, they were working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, because they've got to find the arsonist, whoever this person is, because the thing they're fearing the most is somebody's going to get killed in all this. After 5 months, it is now January of 1993, January 27. They hold one of the most important criminal news conferences in the history of the United States. They had a big television release news conference. Now at that time, I had my own advertising agency. And I had 110 clients, I had 11 employees, and we produced television commercials and radio and all this kind of stuff. And I was a busy camper. I did not encounter the information from that news conference until the following morning. I'm sitting in my easy chair in this home that's all paid for. And big front page story, headline says, someone knows this person. And there's 3 pencil sketches that have been produced of what the arsonist might look like. An artist from Quantico, Virginia, working with a potential witness under hypnosis, went back and recreated what that witness thought the arsonist might look like. So here's 3 pencil sketches, and the title, someone knows this person. So I look at that pencil sketch and my heart just stops, because I said, boy, that looks like our son Paul. Now I'm just telling you, your heart just comes to a stop. So then I began to read every single word in the article, as you can imagine. What if it's yours? Behind the scenes, a profiler named Gus Gary from Quantico, Virginia, for the FBI, had done a great job of coming out and working with the Secret Arson Task Force to develop what are the characteristics that might be helpful to us to understand who we're looking for. So there were 13 characteristics that were listed on this front page article. It goes like this. It said he's probably a loner. So I took a pen and I underlined the things that applied to our son Paul. The reason is I'm looking for the disclaimer. I'm looking for the thing that is a conspicuous, no, this is just bad stuff, tear the thing up, throw it away. Bad stuff. But out of the 13 characteristics, I underlined 12. Every one of them applied. He didn't do well in school. Has nothing to do with intellect. He's got an IQ of 160. But he was just out of place, out of step, out of time, hyperactive child, this kind of stuff. This is before it was a neat code word. If you have I've got a hyperactive child. If you got a real one, you won't act that way. You'll know that's just stupid. So I was underlining the 12. The 13th one said he probably comes from a drunken, fist-fighting family, and that's not true. We're a Christian family. Now, as you will see, my wife is completely angelic. This June 24th, is that the right date? This June, it'll be 55 years that we've been married, my sweetie and I, and she is an angel and has always been an angel. But it said he comes from a drunken, fist-fighting family. That wasn't true. I've been a Christian since April 20, 1958, 8:30 p.m. I've been a Christian 57 years. I was 17 years old when I heard who Christ was. Up until that time, it was when somebody was swearing at somebody. That's the only time I ever heard Jesus Christ. But when I heard who he really was, I became a born-again man. And the Lord has held me for 57 years, just like that, through all of the vicissitudes of life, all of it. So I confess this, I'm kind of an old stumbler and a bumbler, but my heart has been fixed to follow the Savior. But I've had the example of an angel. Here's the pencil sketches. Here are the underlying characteristics. Now, one of the neatest pieces of police work in the history of the United States in this kind of special activity was released. It's this. They noted that there had been 100 fires set in western Washington in 5 months. They also noted that on one day in eastern Washington there were 4 fires. So my heart's going bang, 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 bang. But at that time, as any of you that had anything to do with me in my business. I was super busy, and the responsibility of the business fell so much back on me. I was barely an escapee from high school, but with that, even though I had my own business, I made $25,000 or $35,000 a month 25 years ago, which was good for a kid that just got out of high school. But I had to keep pumping a lot of money back into to kind of keep the whole thing going. So I was so busy, I didn't encounter the final piece of evidence until I walked into my office about 3:30 that afternoon after this huge. So all day my heart's going bang, 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 but I'm just loaded with responsibility. So I walk in to that office. We had a beautiful office, which is now part of City Hall in downtown Everett, on the 9th floor of the Wall Street building. Beautiful office. Walked in. Our daughter was our office manager. She said, "Dad, here's 2 gas slips that put Paul in Eastern Washington on the day of those fires." So, I have said this, and it may sound simplistic, but if you live it out, it might not be. It's that you'll never go wrong doing right. I can hear us as parents or grandparents, you can, okay, but it's the living of it. So, this is what was before me. The pencil sketch, the underlying characteristics, now the gas slips. In reflection in later years, I realized that at that time, I had the means so that I could have told our son Paul, "Paul, we think this is you. We will send you to Australia. Every year or so, I'll just send you some money. And over 2 or 3 years, this will all blow away." And okay. But that never crossed our heart, for which I thank God. That wasn't our heart at all. What did happen is that you'll never go wrong doing right. Right is to stand up and tell the truth. So I said, "You pray." I told my wife and my other youngest son and my daughter, "You pray. I've got to contact the arson task force." So my heart's going bang, 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 bang. Now, I've got this business this is our hometown. My grandfather came almost 100 years ago now to Everett, Washington. We're high school sweethearts. We graduated in 1959 from Everett High School. We lived our whole life there. Our families there. And I've got a really important business in town. I don't want to run up and down the street screaming, "I think it's our son, it's this guy, this terrorist." So I said, "You pray." So I go to a big new fire station, which is now in downtown Everett. It had a big one, just had been built. It's Thursday afternoon. Everything should be operational. I get to that place and the door's locked up. The door that should be open, and I'm pounding on that door, and a blue shirt, first line firefighter, answers the door, and I just blurt out, I said, "I've got to talk to the arson task force." Now hold up. The night before, they'd had this huge news conference with this dictum, somebody knows something about this person. So every line firefighter and every police officer in the state of Washington should have been on red alert. This guy was flatline. Had no knowledge of how to contact the arson task force. So before I could cut and run, it wasn't my heart, but I could have. He hollered over his shoulder. He said, "Hey, Captain." So around the corner comes a guy in a white shirt. He's now the captain. He says, "Hi, George Keller, how are you?" 30 years before, the guy that's now the captain, he was a young, strong kid delivering washers and dryers when I was selling appliances 30 years before that. I said, "I got to talk to the arson task force." Flatline. The captain did not know how to contact the arson task force. Now, I've had the privilege of speaking to the FBI, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, 2,000 or 3,000 fire chiefs all across North America and Canada. And about that time, they just almost die, because it was almost a fatal breakdown in the very thing that needed to exist the most, is to have everybody on the same page so we're ready. He didn't know. He said, "Just a second." So he goes and finds out that the fire marshal in Everett at that time was a member of this secret task force. So I said, "When can I see him?" So his office is across town. So I'm driving across town. All the while my family's praying. And then I'm telling them, "You pray." So I get over to the office and I understand from his secretary, this guy is due in at 4:30. So it's like 4:10. And this is when every minute's like an hour, you know. It's 4:10, 4:20, 4:30. And now it goes on, and it's now 5:10, and the guy still hasn't showed up. And I'm just going crazy. So I just blurted out, I said, "Look, I am not a flake." But I said, "I've got to talk to the fire marshal." 5:35, I'm back in my little chair in our little home. The phone rings, and it's the fire marshal. I said, "I've got to talk to you as soon as I can." He said, "Well, I've got a very important meeting to go to at 6 o'clock. And I said, "Well, when can I see you?" He said, 10 a.m. the following morning. Well, the 6 o'clock meeting that he had to go to was to go and meet with this 120 group of the secret arson task force to see if any leads had been developed as a result of the news conference that they'd held the night before. In police work, there's a skill set that you have awareness now. It's called reading. Reading it's that when you're interviewing a person, what are they like? What's their body language? What are the words that they're saying? What are they not saying? All this, it's a read. But at that time, his reading, he was flatline. If you think I'm intense now, you should have been there 22 years ago. Because, I mean, my heart's just exploding. And I said, when can I see you? 10 o'clock the next morning. How you get through the night? We just cry out. These are the prayers that are beyond words. We just cry out, Lord, Lord. That's how we're alive to this very day. We're, Lord, Lord. So it's now the next morning. It's about 9:45. I'm walking in behind 2 young fellas wearing sports outfits walking into the fire marshal's office. I hear them say to his secretary, we've got a 10 o'clock appointment with the fire marshal. And boy, I'm going, boop, 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 hold on here. I'm the guy with the 10 o'clock appointment with the fire marshal. The fire marshal, who is around the door, I can't see him, but I can hear him, says this. He said, tell the 2 fellows I'll be with them in just a minute as soon as I get rid of the other guy. Yeah. What not to say? What not to say? All the while, I have an option. I can just turn around and go. But God gave me his strength. So here's Mr. Fire Marshal sitting there. And I said, here's a picture of our son, like the pencil sketch. Here are the underlined characteristics, and here's the 2 gas slips. He just turns white. He never says another social word. He just picks up the phone, goes boop, 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 boop. He said, you're not going to believe what I'm going to tell you. He's talking to the 2 lead managers of this entire arson task force. He said, you're not going to believe it. He said, I've got a picture, underlying characteristics, and gas slips. He puts it down over his gut, and he said, Mr. Keller, how soon can you go with me to the arson task force headquarters? I said, right now. Because by then it had been almost 24 hours, this thing just boiling. So I followed him 15 miles down the road to the secret headquarters. When I walked in there were about 40 of the investigators there at that time. I felt like a naked man walking into that place. Every eye in that place is just, who is this guy? And I met the 2 lead investigators, Dane Wetzel from Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, Randy Litchfield, a lieutenant from Seattle Fire. They're young men, big men, but they were like 6'4", 6'5". I mean, physically big men, but they looked like they're 9 feet tall to me. My first words were these. I said, I hope and pray with all my heart that I'm 100% wrong, but I think it's our son Paul. We had a 3.5-hour meeting. We never even blinked, moved from that table. Later, I learned that they said, Mr. Keller, when you came in, we had 500 suspects over this last 24 hours. Basically, every mother-in-law that said, it's got to be my son-in-law, that guy. That's the one. That'll take. But they said 2 minutes after you got here, there was only one. That was your son, Paul. At the end of 3.5 hours, they said, we need time to prove or disprove what you've given to us. I said, well, how long is that going to take? They said, we don't know. What followed was a 10-day, behind-the-scenes, secret relationship we had with the Arson Task Force in cooperation, leading to our son's arrest. Their last words for me as I walked out of that meeting that day, they said, whatever you do, be normal, because we don't want to tip off Paul. At that time, I had my own open office, and I never did go for the little individual boxes where people work in the little boxes. And I like an open office. So, evidently, yeah. So, Paul's desk was closer, 8 or 10 feet from me, and was completely open. I could look right over Paul's shoulder. Here's the here's the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. Here's the courthouse. And here's the jail. Part of our being normal was about every 2 or 3 weeks, I would take my mother-in-law, who was a lovely Christian lady, to dinner. Our whole family, take them to dinner. So to keep the norm, we had the dinner. Our son Paul came in late, and he was crying. He cried through the whole dinner. We never said a word to Grandma. I mean, that would have been just a crime to burden her with such a heart grief. We knew at that time that the plan was that that in about 36 hours, Paul's going to be arrested if everything just goes as is. He comes in and he's crying through the whole dinner. At the end, when we go out to the car, Paul hugs us. Now, in my growing up life, my entire growing up life, I heard my dad say one time, George is a good boy. I never remember ever. My sweetheart, who was raised in a Christian home, but they had that same kind of an atmosphere that there just wasn't this. So we have determined we're on the other ditch. We've gone from one to the other. We're on the other side and we're still there and I ain't moving. And that is, we're going to hug our kids. We've hugged them 10,000 times and kissed them, and now with our little grandchildren, we lick on them, and that's how it really is. So we have had a history of hugging and holding on. That night, when my sweetheart and I got in the car, after we had hugged Paul, we got in the car and said, you realize what just happened? Paul, when he hugged his mother and hugged me, he didn't let go. He knew his life was just blowing up.
Yep.
The plan was, that night, I'm now going to go down and I'm going to sign my document of statement. Because behind the scene, we'd been cooperating for 15 hours in secret with the Arson Task Force. My wife went and gave testimony, our son and our daughter, and another one of our family members, all in secret. Behind the scenes, unknown, the Snohomish County prosecutor had been telling the Arson Task Force, old man Keller will cut and run. He won't stick it out. He won't stand and sign his document. I learned that stuff all later. Well, they're dead wrong, because I can be as stubborn as I need to be, and God has given me the strength to do what is right. So I deliver Mama home after this final dinner. My plan was about 9 o'clock, I'm going to go and meet the task force now at night in the secret headquarters. As I'm pulling out, rolling straight at me in Everett is a 111. 111 is a full code response. Lights and siren. Here's the chief's car, the ladder truck, the aid cars, 5 vehicles rolling straight at me. I'm just dying. Saying, oh God, he's going to set another fire. My phone rings. It's alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. They said, turn around and go home. We got a fire. We don't know what we've got. 3 times that night there were fires in North Everett. 3 times. Midnight I get a call and they said, all the fires have been accidental. Next morning, so how do you get through this? It's this inside. God, are you able to bring me through? I can't even put into words. We can't put into words the pain or the magnitude. If somebody said, do you understand what's happening? No, I don't understand. It's beyond that. It's like almost like being inside a grinding box, inside a black place, and you're being squeezed at every side. So what is the answer? The answer is we say, Lord, Lord. And there's the prayers that are groans. We groan a lot. And we have groaned a lot in these years. Next morning, I am now meeting the 2 lead investigators at Sherry's in Mill Creek. I am signing my statement. I said, I am putting my signature to the paper that everything I've shared and all my testimony with you is true. The beeper goes off on Dane Wetzel. This is before the cell phones were just coming in at that time. Usually the cell phones were about the size of your arm. They were a brick, weighed about 9 pounds. And Wetzel goes, checks his phone call, he comes back, and now he is just white. He said, the thing we have feared the most has happened. We've got a media leak. There's a reporter in Everett that thinks that there's a Paul Keller that works for Keller Advertising that is the arsonist. They said, we've got to take care of it. So they said, Mr. Keller, you go back to your office. So now I'm just like a feather in the wind. Oh God. So I go back to my office, and I park in stall number 24 right outside my office building. When I pull up, there's a remote broadcast satellite TV truck parked right by the front door. So I call the Arson Task Force. They said, we're going to check it. A few minutes, they call me and they said, the truck is there to cover an unrelated story across the street at the courthouse. About that time, our son Paul comes out of our office building about 10:30, about this time, 10:30 a.m., and I gave Paul his last free hug as a free man by parking stall number 24 that day. Unknown to us at that time, behind the scenes, there were 5 undercover cars following Paul everywhere. 3 times that day, they called us and asked us, find out where Paul is. They said he's driving down Interstate 5 at 110 miles an hour. He's going to kill people, and we can't keep up with him. We have to reacquire, that's their word, Paul, so we can continue to follow him. The norm was that about once, usually in the evening, later in the evening, Paul would call, and in relation for the money, because I provided him a fine salary and a new car and all this kind of stuff, and he was the number one heir apparent to the business, but he also was a great salesperson. We would talk, do we do any business today? That would be normal. So it was abnormal for us to have those conversations. So then we learned that the plan was this. It was possible that that day he was calling on my last client, which was in Vancouver, Washington. He might be taken off for California after that. So the plan was this. This is now this last Friday night into the 9th day. And that is that the State Patrol and all the officials were ready. And they said that if he heads south out of Vancouver toward California, we'll shut I-5 down and we'll arrest him. All he had to do was blink and they would have killed him. And nobody would have cried except Mom and Dad. So we're waiting for the phone call. About 6 o'clock, I get a phone call and said he didn't go south, he's headed north toward home. Oh, jeez. Midnight that night, I get the final call. Paul Keller is now back in his apartment in Linwood, right by the Alderwood Mall. I said, let the air out of the tires in that car. I said, it's my car anyhow. It's a brand new car. I just got him. I said, we can't just take this. 5:30 a.m. the next morning, 2 police officials came, hid my family because we had no idea what was going to happen. I'm back in the same room where I was 10 days before. Paul comes in with his in handcuffs like this, first time ever handcuffed. And I said this, they took the cuffs off. I wrapped my arms around him. I said, Paul, they know everything. I said, for once in your life, you've got to tell the truth. Now, behind the scenes, we had been hearing from the task force, 99.9% of everything that they're discovering is Paul Keller. But as Mom and Dad, that's not enough. We have to know. And that was our heart cry. We have to know his very first words were, he said, well, Dad, I did set some fires. That day he confessed to 32 fires. I followed in a 5-car caravan. This is all recorded on video, been played across America many times. Every hour or so, they would stop, take the cuffs off. I would hug Paul, encourage him to tell the truth. And he confessed that day to 32 fires. We were driven from our home that night by the media. You know, the media satellite trucks parked out front, and all of a sudden, you just be kind of cannon fodder. So we went and just drove kind of aimlessly and ended up at a hotel, and we thought we were unobserved, but undercover police officers had been following us to protect us, and we never knew that until later. Next morning, we're at this hotel. They knock on the door. The police officers standing there. They have now brought Paul from the Snohomish County Jail, who had been there for his first night, back to contact Mom and Dad, have a shower. All this was a surprise to us. Have a shower with inside the apartment with Mom and Dad, get him cleaned up. Look out in the hall, there's police officers all down the hall, so he can't escape. He comes in, and we encourage him again to tell the truth. That day he confessed to 44 more fires. That weekend he confessed to 76 fires. He was eventually sentenced to 75 years in prison. We heard the victims of Paul talk before the judge for 3 days. They had every right to talk about the pain and suffering. It's entirely possible that some of you or your parents or your friends were direct victims of Paul. We have never ceased to pray for Paul's victims for 22 years. We have not. We've met some personally, and many have been very gracious. When I walked in after Paul was arrested into my office, I didn't know if I'd have any business. And that turned out to be true. The very first person that left us instantaneously was our pastor. We were in a very large home church. It was like 40 or 50 or 60 people. Very large. It's the equivalent of a church just met in a home for several years. Gone. Over a period of a couple of weeks, we had some support, and then everybody just went away. Whoop. Then over a period of the following 2 years, all the business people went away. My doctor called me in one time, and he said, George, he said, you have leprosy. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, you serve your sentence here on the street where people get at you. Your son serves his in a maximum security prison. But I didn't set any fires. Life as we knew it blew up. Eventually what happened is that the business was totally destroyed. I lost $350,000, which was my savings of a lifetime for us. The home that we had paid for free and clear, we eventually sold for 8 cents on the dollar. That's what we had, 8 cents. We ended up on welfare. That's quite a story in itself. Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Chapter 7 means that you are wiped out. There's nothing left. Nothing left. We sold her clothes because when I was making good money, I was a Nordstrom shopper. There used to, at Nordstrom, I don't know if they have them anymore, but they had women that would help guys like me. They were called Sally Browns. Sally Browns knew all of Margaret's sizes and everything and all the colors. And I was this kind of guy, usually on Christmas Eve, you know. I'd walk in 4 or 5 o'clock on December 24th. Sally Brown would have the stack all there, the pretty boxes and all this kind of stuff. And I could make a selection. Well, being that I'm not, none of you guys would do this, but I'm like, well, I'll take that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. Just give me the box and away we go. Those were nice clothes. Those were like at that time they were like St. John knits. They had really nice clothes. They would be $800, $1,200, $1,500 for a really nice suit. So we sold those at 10 cents on the dollar to eat. We went to Hawaii many times. And what I would do this for my sweetie is that I would usually buy her a ring. And these are these love gifts. And they'd be, again, they're $800 or $1,200 or $1,500. And she was very gracious. A lot of them she probably didn't even like in particular, but I just wanted to do it. We ended up selling all of those for 10 cents on the dollar. See, when you have to sell it. Then we sold our furniture. We'd been living in the same home on this golf course for 34 years. We sold our furniture in our driveway as people would drive by. So we're wiped out. The doctor said, George, you have leprosy. Man. Another businessman that we had done business with got up out of his chair after this all blew up and came and gave me a hug. And he said, George, I just want you to know I'll never do business with you again. Wow. So the abandonment was just a killer. At that time, my angel became tremendously emotionally ill. Now this, I use the term carefully and with understanding what an angel really is. Margaret Keller is that. And totally innocent. The home is gone, the furniture gone, the clothing is gone, the income is gone, the savings are gone, all gone. Sweetie, would you stand here for a second, tell them the impact that had on you for just a little bit, honey? Would you?
Sure. He does such a great job. But I'll just share it from my heart. Really, when we were first aware that it might be Paul setting these fires, that's when I began to plummet. And I mean plummet emotionally. I began to experience panic attacks. I suffered with post-traumatic stress syndrome, anxiety, grief. There's probably something else and I don't recall it right now. But I was a mess, just a mess inside. I knew God was a good God. I knew God was faithful. I just didn't get any of it. I had no attack for the Lord, but I, of course, didn't understand anything. Well, I realized He doesn't expect us to understand everything, but it was very, very painful. Very painful. And I hated the media. I was very, very shy. God has brought me out a lot, but I used to be so painfully shy. Anything to do with the media, get out of my face. I don't want it. I'm sick. Leave me alone. And they don't want to leave you alone, you know. They want the story, the story, the story. So, all of it was just so scary, and I had fear that was just off the charts. I'd always been a fearful child, even a fearful adult. And fear has torment, and anybody who has had it, and some of you here undoubtedly have, it's torment. So for 13 years, went to wonderful Christian counselors. We both went, and then I had to continue because I wasn't getting any better. Now, there were people who had started praying for my healing, and there was a special Monday night group that would meet, and my sweetie would even go to it. Am I talking too long?
No, how do you do it?
Okay. My sweetie would go, and they would pray, and it was a wonderful meeting, but most of the time I didn't go, and I would cry out to the Lord, and I'd say, Lord, just please take me home. It hurts too much. I don't want to be here. I won't commit suicide because I know you don't want me to do that. And I know it's up to you when I go home to glory. I know that. But I still want to be with you. I just want to get out of here. And then I would switch my prayer and I'd say, but Lord, if I'm ever well one day, and if just one person could be helped, just even one, by what we've gone through, I said, I'm willing to stay. I'm willing to stay. No, he is Lord, I know that, but that's how I was talking to him. So one spring morning in 2006, I had gone to bed just as sick as ever. No better. Not the counseling, nothing. Heavily medicated. Slept about 18 hours a day. Yep. Just slept so I couldn't feel, as much. Just drugged. And so I go to bed the night before, and the next morning I wake up, and it's a spring morning, and I go to get out of bed. And I tell you, honest before God, everything changed. Everything was lifted off. The fear, all the conditions that I told you about, lifted. I wanted to sing. I wanted to jump. It was replaced with such joy. And such a download of the Lord's love inside me, not just for me, wonderful as that was, but I wanted to give it all away. Just give it all away. Anybody I'd meet, Lord, I want this love to just flow on them.
Amen.
So I can't thank him enough. And I found a little verse this morning.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did. And if I've got the right page, that let's see here. Here it is. Thy faithfulness reacheth unto the clouds.
Amen.
And what I'd like to tell you in the whole world is that he is faithful and true, no matter how deep a pit, no matter how hard it is, he will come through. Sometimes the waiting is unbearable.
Amen.
But he'll do it. And I praise him and I love him. And thanks for letting me share.
Oh, you sugar plum. Go. Man. All right. We've got 10 pounds of potatoes to put in about 30 seconds worth of time. Applied for welfare. Broken. Embarrassed. Never had imagined that in my life. By then, I was getting 30 or 40 phone calls a day. The blinking red light became a terror to me because I'd had solid gold credit. Remember about the garage? Boy, I was motivated. So in our work life and our business life, I had solid gold credit. I could pay anybody. Just everything was paid, bang. So then the phone's blinking, and the message is this: pay up, pay up. Everything within me wanted to pay up, but I couldn't pay up. Just a terror. So the welfare, I went in and I had about an inch thick stack of documents then of the things I couldn't pay. Just humbling and embarrassed. Went down and applied to the welfare office. I walked down the street. They had built a new office just not far from where we live. And I was a broken man. I went in and applied. Usually, even to this day, if you've got a really tough situation, 2 or 3 days you can get some cash and food stamps. 30 days, nothing happened. So I went in and I applied again, a second time. It's almost like the enemy just pushing your head down.
Yep.
I applied a second time, nothing happened. 30 days after that, I applied again, and nothing happened. During that time, there's another whole story we could tell you about how our daughter brought us $7, and my wife went and she purchased turkey, hamburger, and oranges, and that's how we stayed alive that day. On the 63rd day, I get a call from a voice and says he's representing the Department of Social and Health Services, welfare. Male. He said, "Can I come and see you?" I said, "Okay." Comes to our door, but because of the legal requirement, he had to give me an 8.5 by 11 page that announced that he was a fraud detective for the state of Washington. He was there to see if we were going to steal food stamps and cash from the state of Washington, even though we'd never received 1 cent. We had a red-hot conversation for 90 minutes. I said, "We've given our very life to tell the truth." I said, "But for the fact I'm a Christian man, you've made it so hard. I would end it here today." An hour after he left, I got a call from the suicide prevention line. He checked, can you see the government box on his form? He checked it off. Yeah. A couple days after that, we got our food stamps and cash. Felt like we were rich. But this is where my attitude kind of comes. There'd been a new store just built in South Everett called Top Foods out by the Everett Mall, brand new store. And I told my sugar, I said, "Sweetie, we are not going to go at 4 a.m. and hide in the back of the store." I said, "We're going to go at high noon." I said, "Here's how this is going to work. You pick out the foods that qualify for the food stamps, and when it's time to pay, you stand right behind me." And that's what we did, and that's how we did it, and that's how it should be. Can't pay the bills, end up Chapter 7. I've been in bankruptcy court many times, but I was a creditor. I just offer this to you, and that is, there were 21 people we couldn't pay. Over these years, whenever God brought a miracle, we've gone back and paid off 13 of those Chapter 7 in full. Now, I'm not asking for anybody else to do it. That's not the case. But I'm motivated. You're talking to an old man that's got kind of an attitude. I'm asking my Father to make the provision because I want it all paid off. Why? The court says I don't owe it. I understand that. But I have a unique pulpit. That's the very pulpit of the chair this morning. You can't take it. This is mine. And I'm declaring how good my God is. What does it come out of? It kind of His extraordinary providing in impossible places. Mm-hmm. We have had no income for years and years and years and years and years. No income. So how do you get there? It's the multiple miracle provision of God day by day. We've seen the dollar, we've seen $50, we've seen $500, we've seen $1,000. We've seen God bring us through. So what happens is that God brings these answers in your life. I mean, they're real answers in life. And they become like pickets. I call it like a picket fence society. Every time that answer comes, you paint the picket and you nail it on the wall. And then when the enemy comes and says, da, 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 you say, "No, look at the picket on the wall. We have got a room full of pickets of God's answering prayer in our life, and we're alive today." So we go through bankruptcy. We go through welfare. Interesting, we were on welfare for 5 months. At the end of the 5 months, we sold our home. We now had $12,000, which was our 8 cents on the dollar. Welfare said, "You guys are rich. You don't need us anymore." So we lived on that for the next year. The very day that I got that money from the bank, I received a notice from the welfare department that they hadn't investigated us properly previously. Remember the 3 applications? And that we owed them $1,000. Well, they might as well ask for $1 million. On that same day, I got a bill from the Internal Revenue Service for $13,000 that said you didn't pay this before. That same day. So here's how it unfolded. Eventually, we went before a judge with the Department of Social and Health Services, with a judge. And the judge just kind of shook her head and said, "This is the sorriest case of undue diligence on behalf of the department I've ever seen." And she said, "You don't owe a dime." The Internal Revenue Service, you know those heart attacks, after due diligence on their part, said, "Oh, we made a mistake. You don't owe us a penny." But all the while, I can feel the enemy night after night. He would come and pound on my head. Bang, bang. Why did you do everybody just a favor and drop dead now? Because you're not doing anything. But what would rise up inside is this. Inside would come this thing. And it's him, not me, his strength. And I would pound our little table. We've been in a little 700 square foot apartment in a fourplex now for 19 years. That was the size of our carport. I'm not squawking. But I'd pound the table, and I would say, "I declare victory in the name of Jesus Christ," and we'd be alive another day and another week and another month and another year. So you're talking to people with attitude. We have seen the miracle provision of God. We have had extraordinary exposure of opportunity to let our life story go out. We had the privilege of being with Dr. James Dobson, and that was 17 years ago, and that 7 or 10 million people heard it the first time. Then they asked, can we reproduce it in Spanish, which they did, and played it in 40 countries, and so that, thank God for that. They made a movie of our life, a movie of the week, a CBS, called Not Our Son. That's aired many times across America, still does to this day. There have been several television programs that go out, and every once in a while we're able to say a word for Jesus. But here's the word, and that is that in our life, in this whole experience, we have not backed up 1 inch about the fact that we are born-again Christian people and love Jesus. Period. In Hebrews 13:5, this is my Bible of 57 years. This one. When we learned, after our son was arrested, we went and retrieved his medical records from our family physician and the hospital. Same family physician, 35 years, delivered all 3 of our children. We go and retrieve the medical records because we have implicit trust in our doctor. And it shows that it was 18 hours from the time that our son was born until he was on his mother's breast bonding. 18 hours. Well, we were dumb as a post. We didn't know. Now, you know instantly, you girls all know that instantly in about 10 seconds, that baby's on mama's breast and bonding starts. In the 18 hours, what we had never been told is that the medical record said he's blue, cyanotic, cold, and convulsive. His umbilical cord had come untied. He was almost dead. Blue, cyanotic, cold, convulsive, held in an incubator, given 4 quarts of glucose, and we had never been told a word in our entire life. Now it's 27 years later, and now he's in jail. We took this very Bible, and my sweetheart and I, we laid it on the floor, and we literally, physically laid on this Bible and said, Lord, we lay our life in your word. We will live or die based on you. So we're now 22 years and some months down the road. Our attitude is this: we're talking to happy people. The miracle healing of my wife is a true miracle. Sometimes in our common conversation we use the word, it's a miracle. I've got news for you. When it's a real one, you'll look at that word somewhat different. The fact we're alive is an insult to the enemy every single day, because he wanted us dead and gone, but we're alive and well. And we're entering the 4th quarter of our life. I just finished 8 years as a senior associate pastor for a little church that started with nothing and became something called Jake's House up in Arlington. And I just resigned from that. There's a young pastor there who's doing all kinds of wonderful stuff, and that's fine. Our whole concentration now is this. This is called George Keller Ministries. Being the vast creative person that I am, I came up with that by myself. I'm just overwhelmed with humility, but that's how it really is. But people need to know, and with this I'm going to close. We've got testimonies that go on and on and on of God keeping under impossible circumstances. So when I look at this verse of Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5, the Lord said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. We've seen it. We are living it. We have got more life experiences that you can imagine. We have seen the miracles of God. The very fact that there is such an opportunity for a pulpit of today to encourage you. I was frankly intimidated coming down. I said, they've heard it all. They've been there and done that. I mean, they're all professional Christians. They're all shined up. Oh, my land. Well, let's see. I declare that our God is high and lifted up. He is to be praised, and he is worthy. And we can trust him with every single thing.
Amen.
And that's where we are. And so what is the work? It's not work. What lies before us? It is the opportunity to simply say, our God is good. And the number one thing you need to do when all this is going to be gone is that it's your relationship with Jesus and your abandonment to him. And if there's a good word that you can say to another person along this life journey to encourage them in Jesus, okay, that's the work.
Can I say one sentence?
Yeah, sure.
The best thing that we have learned to do in our Christian walk is this.
Yes.
We heard a pastor years ago. They said, if you forget everything else I've said, remember this: yield,
Yes.
yield, yield. And that's exactly what we do. And life gets better every day.
Amen.
Because he does it.
Amen.
It's kind of a Job story almost. You know?
Well, we felt like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
There's so much that we could share. We just simply don't have the time. Just so much to share. But you're talking to people here who have got so many gifts from our Father that this is our privilege now at this fourth quarter of our life to just say, okay, we want to tell you about Jesus in the real world. And our son, by the way, in prison, a maximum security prison, is not just a born-again Christian. He returned to the Lord the night that he was arrested. He's worked full-time in the chaplain's office for 18 years. He's a rock-solid born-again Christian man in prison, in a maximum security prison. That's another whole story for which we thank God. Well, what do you think? Amen?
Amen.
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 Well, thanks so much for coming in and sharing your
It's our
story
joy.
with us.
Our joy.
Bless your children.
And bless you guys.
Thank
after
you.
what we've been through.